Hey, everybody. Good morning. Jeremy and Joe. Draft talk kind of getting started. Combine season is on the way. The Combine getting started in a couple of weeks from Indianapolis. Of course, we'll have complete coverage of that. And joining us on the Worcester Hotline is Chris Trapasso, who we talk to from time to time about the draft, about young players in the NFL. Chris, good morning. Thanks for taking time today. How are you?
I'm doing great, and you playing a KC Concepcion highlight, I believe that was a punt return touchdown, is music to my ears because he's one of my favorites for the Bills early in this draft.
Yeah, we'll get to him. I saw you posted a big video about him just the other day. One thing I want to ask you, we'll get to a lot of receivers, I'm sure, over the course of the next couple months, and linebackers and safeties and defensive line edge. How as the Bills change what they do schematically, do you find that it's maybe a more interesting offseason than the last few because of all those defensive changes? Like the type of player you can kind of forecast as a fit is a lot different?
100%, because we don't really know, which, maybe that uncertainty creates anxiety for fans or people in the media, but I think in general it's fun because there has been so much status quo with this Bills organization in terms of who they're going to bring in, the archetypes that they're going to try to target in the draft. We just don't know. And I think that change was needed, and to have obviously the same offensive coordinator, same play caller, but a completely different philosophy on the defensive side, way more blitzing, way more man coverage. And I think specifically the biggest difference will be there will be two edge players. There will be a defensive lineman that will have his hand in the dirt, that will be like a 5 technique, bigger, longer, 6'4", 300 pounds, somewhere in that range. And then the stand-up rush linebacker that will actually be your classic, what you picture in your mind as an edge rusher. When during the Sean McDermott era, they really just plugged in the Greg Rousseaus, the A.J. Epinezas, they drafted Landon Jackson, that were bigger, they could play all 3 downs. Those were their only edge rushers. So I think on the defensive side, there's just a lot more variety in what Jim Leonhard can do based on the personnel that he's going to bring in.
What do you think they need the most from those new types of players? Guys that you don't see kind of transition from what McDermott used to run to what Leonhard runs?
Well, this is something that I thought the Bills needed during the McDermott era, and they really never tried to acquire this player who was young. They do need that smaller, quicker, faster speed rusher on the outside who can win to the quarterback in under 2 seconds or under 2.5 seconds. That was the one issue that even when I think why Gregory Rousseau he's a good player, we all understand that, but why he seems to kind of be invisible in some of the bigger games against the better quarterbacks, at 6'7" and 260 pounds, it takes him longer to win. And the pressures, if you looked at a lot of his time to pressure, it was one of the slowest in the NFL. A.J. Epineza had that problem. Really the only time that they brought in that type of player was Von Miller, and he was in his mid-30s, and before that injury in 2022 was really good, and after that, not so much. Javon Solomon, you could say, was that type, but being a day 3 pick, it wasn't a heavy investment. So I think getting up with the times in the NFL and showing that against a Joe Burrow or against even a Bo Nix or a Patrick Mahomes or the litany of really good young quarterbacks that are coached to get the ball out quickly, you need that 6'2", 6'3", Nick Bonito type, 240 to 250 pound outside linebacker that can win just with speed and power and burst around the corner and affect the quarterback in a flash, because the ball does come out that quick in today's NFL.
Yeah, to do that, Chris, to talk about the players that they might need at this position, we could evaluate what they have here, right? And that's Rousseau. And after that, Javon Solomon and Landon Jackson. This is definitely not this is not Landon Jackson, right? This is a totally I don't know if they might find a fit for him, but you're talking about bend. You want bend in the next set of defensive ends from the Buffalo Bills.
First step quickness, bend around the corner, that flattening to the quarterback ability that, again, we did see a little bit in the Von Miller, the first 10 games of that season, his first in Buffalo. Beyond that, the Bills don't have that bendy type of player. Javon Solomon, I think, has a little bit of it, but the first step quickness with him is not going to threaten a lot of offensive tackles in the NFL. So, yes, that's exactly the type they need. And I would say, no, Landon Jackson is not a great fit. He's really one that stands out. I do think that Jim Leonhard will try to fit as many of the players as he has into the scheme because the Bills aren't rebuilding. But no, Landon Jackson at 6'5" and 265, 270 pounds potentially is not that type.
How is this draft class for this type of edge rusher you're talking about? Are they, I mean, of course, like the guys at the very, very top tend to be the freak show pass rushers, but how about late first round, second, third? Like, is it a good class for bendy, speedy rushers?
It is. I think the edge rusher class is probably the deepest that I've graded in the last 5 or 6 years. It's not just Reuben Bain and another name that's probably going to be one of the top picks, David Bailey from Texas Tech. There are a bunch of others that I could run through, but I think it's kind of early to do that. We got to see how these guys test too. But I can tell you that the 15 or so edge rushers that I've watched and evaluated so far, there are more of those 6'2" to 6'4", 235 to 255 pound stand-up rush linebackers that I think Jim Leonhard will really like in this draft process.
While we're on the defense, what would be next on your wish list? Another linebacker or probably the safety that would be next to Cole Bishop?
Safety, definitely. I think, I heard you guys in the previous segment talking with Sal, and you guys in unison agreed that the other safety is not on the roster right now. And I just raved about the edge class. The safety class might actually be better. I think, and I'm looking at my grades from all my past scouting grade books. I'm only I think I'm 10 safeties in, the best safety class that I've ever evaluated. It is not just Caleb Downs. And frankly, I think Caleb Downs at this point from Ohio State is a awesome prospect. I think he's a tad overrated.
And they have him going top 5 maybe? How have you seen him go?
I don't think he's Eric Berry or Kyle Hamilton, who obviously should have been picked way earlier. I'm trying to think of other safeties who went super duper early. Jamal Adams went way early. I think Caleb Downs is very good, but don't think that this class is just anchored by him. You will see at the Combine some big-time testing. There's a safety from Oregon, a safety at Maryland, the Toledo safety that Lance Zierlein mocked to the Bills last week, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, who looks like Nick Emanwari playing in the MAC. He's big. He's super explosive. It is a very good safety class. And to me right now, that is after wide receiver, the position that I would handicap as the next position that the Bills address after picking a wide receiver in the first round.
Wide receiver first round is what you want. All right, Chris, you said it means we're allowed to get there. Chris, one thing I wonder about this receiver class, like I've seen, a number of others talk about 11 of the top 50, or there's a good number here, and it might not have the Marvin Harrison Jr. name, but then I got Carnell Tate at the top, and Neighbors versus Jordan Tyson. And 2 years ago, we saw 7 receivers go in the first round. And I'm seeing a routine 6 here. And if we're going the first 2 rounds, how many are we at? Are we at 10 to 12 wide receivers that are worthy of the first 2 rounds?
Yeah, I think this wide receiver class will get probably that many. But I think for this class, that will just be more so because the position is so valuable. And even though there's seemingly a surplus of quality talent at the position in every class, teams just understand. They're on to you, Jeremy. They know that wide receiver really moves the needle in the NFL today. So I think what you brought up is a very good point, that there's no Malik Neighbors. I don't even think there's a Tet McMillan in this class necessarily. There's certainly not like a Drake London or a Jamar Chase or a Jalen Waddle, those guys that have all been consensus top 10 picks. But it does feel like after that, and to me, more so late round 1 all the way into early round 3 is where I think you can get the proper value at this wide receiver spot. I think it's a good class, but not an amazing class at wide receiver.
Do you think that there's any copycat league, say what you will, do you think that JSN will force teams to reevaluate falling in love with guys that are big?
I hope so. I mean, it is a long time coming, and I think if you, and this is not anything toward the Bills, this is just in general, if your offensive coordinator, whether he's your head coach, play caller, whatever, if he is just statically keeping a 6'1", 200-pound wide receiver at X on the outside to the left of the formation 80% of the time, that's a problem with your offensive play caller and your play designer. We saw JSN align in the backfield and run wheel routes like James Cook would run, in the slot, on the outside, in motion, at Z, all the other positions, and he was 6 foot, 190 pounds at his combine. He was not particularly big. So I think in today's NFL, we have seen it for the last 5 to 7 years, and I feel like we've kind of talked about it on this show, you do not need to be 6'1", 205 to play outside receiver in the NFL. Bunch formations, stack formations. I think Joe Brady actually does a very good job moving around his receivers and using different alignments. So, yes, I think if you're 5'8", 170, you're not going to play on the outside. But as long as you're a little bit taller than that and maybe have a little bit more weight, you can play inside and you can play outside, and you really should be moved around in a lot of different spots pre-snap.
How many of these top receiver prospects, especially in the first 2 rounds, would you say have limitations that would prevent them from doing what you just mentioned with JSN, where like you can move him in any position and expect results?
The only one that I think it would be a projection, that might be a first or a second round pick, is Zachariah Branch from Georgia, who is probably going to run one of the fastest 40s. He reminds me a lot of Kadarius Toney when he was coming out of Florida, and I know Toney's had like off-field problems and all that, but he's that type of gadget player, and he was never really deployed in any other way. But Mekhi Lemon was mostly a slot receiver. He reminds me a lot of Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I think he can play on the outside. I mean, he would fit in that smaller outside receiver that is going to just completely uncover against any bigger, not as athletic corner on the outside. Carnell Tate can win on the outside. Concepcion can win on the outside. Omar Cooper from Indiana. So it's not really a class that I think there's, the best receivers are 5'9", 180 pounds. I think a lot of them can play on the perimeter 40, 50, 60% of the time in the NFL.
Yeah, Branch is. I'm trying not to become biased towards Branch because I play with him in the video game and he's insane. But I also
he's
saw
really athletic.
Like yesterday, I read a piece about him, and the NFL comparison I saw for him was Curtis Samuel, which didn't make me feel
that's where
great.
I have him too.
Curtis Samuel, like, and that is where like a guy like that, or maybe somebody else, where yak is mentioned as like one of the first things that makes the guy special. I wonder how that will sit with Bills fans, and also what the Bills would think, because they already have Shakir for that, but I don't know, like they clearly think it's important, and I wonder if they would go for another guy that has that as one of their, top traits.
Yeah, and again, I think with Zachariah Branch, he's going to test really well, and I think after the Combine, we're going to be talking about him like, all right, he's going to go in the first round just based off of his Combine workout. But again, with him, I think there is projection. It's kind of like, it's not apples to apples, but when Zay Jones came out of East Carolina, tested through the roof, he was bigger, but at East Carolina, they just threw him like 10 bubble screens a game, and it took him a long time to learn the route tree, learn subtleties to get open. With Zachariah Branch, I think the best situation for a team with him is if he does slip late into the first, early into the second, that's when you pick him to say the talent is just too good to pass up. But to me, a first-round wide receiver needs to be pretty close to being a finished product in the ways that you want him to win in the NFL.
Chris Trapasso joining us on the Western Hotline. Chris, I want to get to Concepcion, who you talked about, but the way the Bills room is constructed now, I know you weren't a big fan of the Keon Coleman pick, but you have been a big Khalil Shakir guy pretty much from the start. Yeah. Do you think that the next version of the Bills offense has, in Shakir, a receiver that they don't use, right? Like they use him so close to the line of scrimmage and behind the line of scrimmage that if they just decided, you know what, we actually have a guy that can be used down the field, then it's almost like getting a brand new receiver that you already have.
That's a really good point, and I think that I can kind of play off what Joe mentioned with Zachariah Branch, that if he's the player that they pick, Branch, or they do pick a wide receiver that is a yards after the catch specialist, I absolutely agree with what you're getting at, that we've seen Khalil Shakir make difficult grabs down the field. He's not someone that ran 4.6 at the Combine. He ran in the 4.4s. He is a little smaller and shorter and doesn't have long arms, but that does not mean that you can't win down the field. So that could be something where whether it's a Christian Kirk in free agency or it is someone in the draft, or they, the number one wide receiver that they either trade for or draft is really good after the catch on screens, has contact balance, then I think it would be really smart for the Bills to say, look, Khalil Shakir does not need to be this extension of the run game type player. His average depth of target can increase by 2 or 3 yards next season because I think he is a very well-rounded wide receiver who catches everything.
Chris Trapasso joining us on the Western Hotline. All right, so to Concepcion, who you mentioned, Texas A&M, one comp I've seen for him, and it's because of a very specific thing that he does, which is separate at all three levels. It's like wins early, intermediate, and downfield. I've seen it comp to Zay Flowers, who, of course, went to the Ravens. That was one of the things they said about him. What do you like about Concepcion? And the big knock against him, of course, that I read, is his drop rate. He does have a case of the drops, which might be why he could be available at the end of the first round as opposed to earlier.
Yeah, I think the Zay Flowers comp is pretty good. I actually think that Zay Flowers was a little bit more explosive when changing directions. I actually have comped Casey Concepcion, ironically, to Rashid Shaheed, who the Bills were apparently in on at the trade deadline. With Concepcion, like you mentioned, when you watch the Texas A&M film, he wins underneath, after the catch, when they scheme him open on those Khalil Shakir type plays. He showed really intricate and advanced route running ability at the intermediate level to get open on dig routes, on post corner routes that are really hard to run where you're changing directions twice on one play. And then to me, what I think the Bills offense certainly needs, and I think we could all agree, the vertical separation is definitely there. I don't know if he's going to run like 4.28 or 4.31 and completely erupt at the combine, but I think he's going to be in somewhere in the 4.4 range, maybe high 4.3s. And what I do like about his ability downfield beyond the speed that will kind of counteract some of the drops. He had 7 drops on 101 targets last year. 10 of 15 contested catch wins last season. So you see him when he wins down the field and he's open, there's a safety coming over the top, hitting him. He's not dropping the football. He can make those difficult grabs in traffic. So I think at 21 years old with only 3 years of college experience, when some of these guys are entering the league 4, 5, 6, 7 years in college because of the COVID year and all that, I think there is so much upside with this player, but he's also pretty refined and pretty ready to win as a separator, which is what the Bills offense has needed from the get-go.
Is there an idea at this position you do not like?
Like in round one?
Yeah. Or a player that you would just like is kind of on like a stay away alert from you?
I got to see the combine because I really factor that in a lot to my evaluations. I'm a little lower on Jordan Tyson than everyone else. I think what he showed at like 18 or 19 years old was impressive. I don't know if he got better after that. And he did have a really good quarterback last year, and I know Sam Levitt got hurt midway through the season at Arizona State. But I think Jordan Tyson he's not exactly to the Keon Coleman range where I really did not think the Bills should have drafted Keon Coleman in 2024. But I think of like the presumed to be, their top 3 wide receivers, top half of the first-round picks, Jordan Tyson from Arizona State, I think is a little bit overrated at this point.
How did you like hearing Joe Brady and Brandon Beane continue to take up for Keon Coleman? Again, understanding you were not on the pick at the outset, he has shown some ability. Do you think it's worth it for them to keep trying this thing? I see somebody else recently, was it an NFL receiver, talking about how he's been unfairly criticized and there's some skill in there, there's ability in there. Do you think it's worth continuing to try it, or would you cut bait?
I would try to find someone to trade with. Like, I think he needs a change of scenery. It would make sense as the Bills have this awesome opportunity to rebuild their entire wide receiver room. And I heard you guys before 8 o'clock, like if you bring back Coleman and you bring back Josh Palmer and you have Shakir, you have 3 of the same receivers. I think it needs, I don't want to say a complete overhaul where it's just Shakir and then 4 new guys, but 2 or 3 new wide receivers I don't think would be crazy in this in this offense. And I wonder, not that I'm a big press conference analysis person, but after what Terry Pagula said about a player, on the roster, took a lot of criticism for that. I wonder how much of Brandon Beane and Joe Brady during the Joe Brady press conference was like, hey, this guy's on our roster, we believe in him. And that's what a coach and a GM have to say at this point, even if they're just trying to keep his trade value more than, a 2028 7th-round pick. I mean, they were not necessarily heaping praise on Kyer Elam, but Brandon Beane and company 2 years ago were, hey, we believe in him. He's entering year 4, new coach, and they ultimately traded him and got a 5th-rounder back. So I think they have to go into the offseason saying that about a player on the roster to keep the trade value up. And if they can't find someone to trade for him, he may have to be the wide receiver 4 or 5 on this roster.
Chris Trapasso joining us on the Western Hotline ahead of the draft. Chris, thanks. We'll of course check in maybe after the combine because there's a lot still to be determined, and I'm sure that I'm going to get excited about every one of these wide receivers saying that they have met with the Bills, because if there's a tradition unlike any other, it's the Bills meeting with all of the receivers, even if they don't draft them or they do draft them. They always talk about it. They always flirt with it. Maybe this year they finally get it done.
Yeah, totally. One last thing I want to say. I always think about your Twitter profile pic, which I do remember was from the Mario Williams saga.
That's right.
And I feel like this year, when the Bills draft a receiver in the first round, that can apply for you just in pure exuberance when they actually pick a receiver in the first round, that picture will apply to that situation as well.
Yes, indeed. Or if they don't, the picture applies too.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point.
It's a beautiful thing about my profile picture. I could never change it because it's good or bad. It fits every scenario. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Joe.
Chris Trapasso on the Western Hotline, 803-0550 and 1-888-550-2550 on edge rushers, on receivers, on safeties. The good news is, in all three cases, it sounds like the classes are good at all three positions. So,
yeah.
All right. That's good.